because we take out the IB exam prep and stuff that we are doing before that exam prep. We'll just stretch out a little bit, and then we'll insert another topic, and we'll call that topic Cold War. So we'll bring in the Cold War piece, all right? And that'll be wrapping us up for 3.1 or 3.2. So there we go. What kind of reaction did you have, though, when you found out that you will not have IB exams? All right, there's some like, woo! All right, others might, oh. Anyone disappointed? No, I would say the IB exams with the AP exams, 2 to 3 weeks of doing the exams. You, the students, doing exams, not necessarily me, but you're doing the exams, and the exhaustion, the physical and mental exhaustion. Let's take that piece out.
Well, my May is going to be a lot less stressful because I was going to have 4 IB exams and 1 AP, and so now it's just 1 AP exams.
And and will that AP exam, have you been told how that will be? Will that be online or will it be in person?
I don't know for sure. I think it will be, I'd assume, just with the way things are, probably online. Like last year I took an AP exam and it was online, but I think it might look a little bit different. Like I heard they're not going to like cut down as much on the material on the actual AP exam. It's going to be closer to what you do if you actually were sitting in person taking it.
Okay, gotcha. Woo! Emma, that's a lot. Emma says she was going to take 6 exams. That's a lot of exams. That's going to be more exams. I think of that 2 to 3 week window of the AP and the IB exams. That's actually more than you would probably experience in college, at the end of a quarter or semester, whatever that college is. There are some times, I think back, where it was just a matter of turning in a paper sometimes in college, and that was it. Like my foreign language class, my German class, if you had an A going into the final exam, you didn't even have to take the final exam. So there are some times I might have only had, like, of the 4 classes, 1 class having an final exam during that 2-week window of it. So, okay. So with that, we don't have that stress, and then there'll be some adjustments in IB history, and of course in some of your other classes there'll be some adjustments that'll go on. All right. Now, like I said, you may not think that I'm making some adjustments based on this week. We've got 3 weeks left, and there are still some summative pieces in there that need to happen. And so that last thing that we see on our screen here is a summative that's going to put closure to this unit, cause and effects of 20th century war. It's going to be a short answer exam, and I'll explain a little bit more of that as we get closer to it. It'll actually open up on Friday, but it will close on Sunday. So it's a 60-minute exam. So whenever you start it, you got 60 minutes to win it. So you can either do it that Friday, and it'll open up actually after the class period, because we'll use the class period as maybe some prep time, but also introduce the new unit on the authoritarians. But you can do it later that day, but 60 minutes in the start. You can do it Saturday. Do not wait 11:59 on a Sunday to do it, because it'll close right when you open it up. All right. There is a review sheet that I did put in the assessment folder, so to help guide you as well. But it'll be focusing on the First, the Second World War, but also the Spanish and the Chinese Civil War will also be brought in there too. Okay. Any questions, thoughts, concerns with that? Okay. So you had the assignment Road to the Second World War, and you're looking at Germany and Japan. And just kind of looking back at that assignment before we move on into the total war. When it comes to like Germany, does anyone want to speculate, of that list here, of here, and let's see if I can get this old assignment up here. Put it on the screen, your screen. We're looking at that list of German events. Let's see if we can share this tab here, because this will be a test. Yep. From this list, which one kind of seemed like the smoking gun here? Like it was a big event. So revising the Treaty of Versailles up to the invasion of Poland. Which one, where does it look like Germany is intent on going to war? That might be a better. What do you got?
The reoccupation.
Okay, the reoccupation of the Rhineland. And what spoke to that?
Well, I mean, Hitler with his military and militarized. So.
Okay, all right. And the Western powers, they did nothing. Okay. Anyone else want to throw something out there? What do you got, Drew?
I'm going to say the Nazi-Soviet pact, because the second he got the Russians to agree to not attack him for, I'm not sure how long the treaty said, but it was a while. They split up Poland, and they never liked each other, but they agreed for a while that if they cut Poland basically in half, then they were going to attack each other. That meant that Hitler was free to pursue lots of things in the West without fear of retaliation from the West.
Right. So he really got his big threat on the East neutralized.
So he could do whatever he wanted.
Right. And now the Soviet Union engaged in really two non-aggression pacts, one with Germany and another one with Japan. And so realistically, it's buying the Soviet Union time, because I'm sure, Stalin, he's got a game plan. He's got a game plan. He's got to rebuild his army. He had purged so much of it anyhow. He's buying time, working on the industrialization pieces. That's when we're going to start seeing some of the factories moving further east into Siberia, away more safe areas and stuff like that. So that's a good one. That's a sign that France and Great Britain, you're kind of on your own for the moment. All right. Anyone else? Now, one that usually doesn't get a lot of play is the Hossbach Memorandum. And that one, there's really three elements to it that scream that Hitler is playing his war plan cards out there. One, it begins to, in a secret meeting with some high-ranking German officers and ministers, he spells out his plan of what kind of economy he wants. He wants a war economy. He wants to build autarky. All right, something I threw out, I think, about Japan. This idea of self-sufficiency. If you're going to fight a war, you're going to have resources to do that. There's only a few countries at that time that could possibly have a sense of autarky or close to it, and that would be the United States and the Soviet Union. If they get everything, the thing that's preventing those countries both from having full autarky, especially the United States, is we're in the Great Depression. And the Soviet Union is in an industrialization phase right now, and trying to recover from a great famine too. But so the idea of autarky, he also throws out his racial plans. And this is where he also is saying we got to get ready for war, which kind of shocks some of his ministers, because this is the first time he's really outright saying we're going to get ready to go to war. And so then a few months later, that non-aggression pact, or about a year later, that non-aggression pact is going to be signed. So huge. Hossbach memorandum is big. When it comes to Japan, most of the difficulties here, if you can look at it, speak with the West, but then also there are some that are specifically speaking to difficulties with the United States too. Okay, where on this list does it look like kind of give a signal that Japan is going to get ready for game on? It's a little bit harder.
Maybe the Manchurian incident.
Leaving the League of Nations and pulling out of like the naval treaty is just kind of an important sign that like they're not going to play with others right now, and they're kind of separating themselves from the group and going to do their own thing, and they're kind of tired of being told what to do and like having to adhere to the rules of other countries. So I think that was a sign that they were kind of ending their relationships with some of the Western countries, and I think that really increased tensions between the West and Japan.
So yeah, the Japan leaving the league is what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Yes. The Amano doctrine, kind of like Japan's going to do things on their own. I guess in some ways you can look at it as kind of like a Japan first idea. Okay, that's a big one. Nate, did you say something from at home?
Yeah, I said the Manchurian incident.
Okay.
Even though it wasn't done by the Japanese government themselves, it was the Japanese army that was a part of it, and I think this is what spawned multiple events of just bombarding the Chinese and taking over its land and territory, which increased tensions between the Europeans and the United States.
Okay.
As well.
That is a good one in that, but it also shows that in Japan, they're in a transformation here. The civilian government is having a very difficult time controlling the military, the rogue elements in the military. The military is doing things. It's kind of like, we're just go ahead and do it, and then we'll ask for forgiveness later. And the Western powers, they're not really going to do anything because they're fixated, it seems like, on Germany. And of course, we have the global depression happening as well. So the Manchurian incident is a big one as well. Japan leaving the League of Nations. And when you look at Pearl Harbor in some ways looks like it's a desperation act, if anything. I had read a book, 1941, and it was all about that year, 1941. You know, I got goosebumps thinking about it because it kind of reminds me of a book I also read called 1865, which was all about it was April 1865, which was all about United States. In 1865, you have the end of the Civil War. Lincoln gets assassinated. The United States really could go down a spiral downward. So critical time. 1941 is very similar to Japan. There is a lot of discussion in the Japanese government, and the emperor is really involved in the process as well. Sometimes he's portrayed as kind of hands off, but he has working knowledge of what the heck is going on here. But 1941 looks like a desperation move here. Attack the United States with the idea that they're going to back down. And that didn't work. That didn't work out for them. Okay, huge, huge. So you can look at both of these, the war in Europe as a Hitler's war and the war that breaks out in Asia Pacific. You can look at the responsibility of Japan. There are some historians, revisionist historians, even some post-revisionist historians that like to kind of point the finger at the United States. But we know that conflict in general, everyone has some type of role and responsibility there. Okay. All right. Any thoughts on that? Okay. All right. Ooh. Showing you a screen here. Post Valentine's Day, I guess there. Total war. All right. We made a good claim. So I'm going to try shifting here to this idea the Second World War is a total war. And we can make probably a better claim that this war is a total war versus the First World War. And when we look at the scope of it, it is definitely a global conflict. When we look at the number of participants, the technology, all that stuff, and compare it to the First World War, it is leaps and bounds. The numbers is astounding here. The technology is highly advanced compared to the First World War. The number of victims, in many cases, is going to be doubled, and majority of the victims in this war is actually going to be civilians than actual combatants. And governments are definitely going to be changed here as a result of this war. All right. And so what does, an element of the total war is impact at home. Sometimes we like to focus on conflicts abroad that they're, for us here in the United States, we haven't had too many conflicts fought on our soil. Fair statement? Okay. Especially when you look at the 20th century, you're not really going to find conflicts fought on U.S. soil, with the exclusion of U.S. territories. All right, we'll say that. They will sometimes be brought into conflicts. So for us, the home front, that is going to be very, very important. So this clip here that I'm going to show is going to be on the home front. So we'll see how this plays out. What I want us to do is just watch and see what actually goes into it, and who is impacted by it. And then, think of some, maybe we can come across some takeaways. So let's see how this plays out. So I think for those of us here, you might want to mute because I'm going to plug it in. All right, we'll just figure out how this goes. Today is going to be a fun day. All right. And here on this.
From an army of 300,000 in 1940, American armed forces would swell to 15 million. At the beginning of the war, there was considerable fear that these hastily assembled citizen soldiers could hold their own against a highly trained and heavily equipped enemy. News from the front had not been good. 3 months after Pearl Harbor, the Japanese had inflicted a series of humiliating defeats on an America whose confidence was shaken. On February 23rd, 1942, the president tried to calm and to rally a frightened nation.
This is war. The American people want to know and will be told the general trend of how the war is going.
The president had asked every American to follow his speech on a map.
I had huge maps on my wall from the backs of newspapers. I marked it with crayon, and I remember, putting arrows and X's and circling towns.
We Americans have been compelled to yield ground, but we will regain it.
I remember his confidence and the tone of his voice and the closeness that you felt to him. He was a beacon of light.
Oh boy, when he came on the radio.
Soon, we and not our enemies will have the offensive. We, not they, will win the final battle.
He had the capacity of moving us with words, of inspiring the country, of lifting the country to do more than it might do otherwise.
there is one thought for us here at home to keep uppermost: the fulfillment of our special task of production, uninterrupted production.
So make your mind up when you get out of bed. Work your head off so you can keep your head.
Government films pounded home the fact that America not only had to supply its own troops, but meet the needs of its allies as well. Workers in cities across the country responded.
During the war at night, the mills would be going full blast, and the sky would pulse red with the blast furnaces going off. And we were told at school, and we heard on the radio and saw in the newspapers that Pittsburgh was helping to win the war.
In Detroit, it took just 9 months to convert the entire capacity of the American automobile industry to war production.
They dubbed Detroit as the arsenal of democracy. The plants operated 24 hours a day, around the clock. You had bombers coming off the line every 5 minutes. Work till they almost fall out, then somebody take your place. I was working on the Jeeps. We sprayed the Jeeps with this olive paint. Can you imagine working 18 and 24 hours a day, staying in the shop? You run home and look at your family and run back to the shop again.
With existing manpower strapped to the limit, there was another pool of workers ready to be tapped.
Factory owners were very reluctant to hire women. They argued they'll never learn how to operate these complex machines, and if they come onto the assembly line, they'll distract the men, productivity will go way down, and besides, they shouldn't leave their homes. It'll be the end of the home and the family. But then by about 1942 or 1943, when so many men were in the armed forces, they had to turn to women. So suddenly the whole attitude toward women coming to work changed.
Between 1940 and 1944, the number of women in war-related industries rose 460% to a high of 19 million, a full third of the entire civilian workforce. Half of those women were wives and mothers who had never held jobs before.
My mother was a nice lady who baked and cooked and cleaned house and whacked her kids around to make sure they stayed in line. And suddenly, she's running a machine at an aircraft factory. She felt she needed to do something.
I think there was an underlying, unexpressed kind of patriotism, not the kind that waves flags, but it was the kind that loved our lives, that loved our country, and we all worked for one reason: to get those airplanes in the sky.
In Boeing's Seattle plant, half the workers were women. In just 4 years, they turned out over 12,000 B-17 bombers.
They call it the Flying Fortress. Most awesome plane. Oh, what a feeling of accomplishment. Even if you only did the riveting and on part of it, they couldn't have done it without you.
I became an ABS welder, top of the line. I wore a leather suit. I had a helmet with glasses through it. I pulled this down. I could see through the glass in the helmet. I had a acetylene torch to join pieces of steel together. I was determined that I was going to build ships to show Japan that we would hit back.
Thanks in large part to these women workers, American factories turned out 4,000 tanks and 4,500 planes every month. And ships, which used to take 1 year to assemble, were now being completed in 17 days. Production expectations were not only being met, they were being surpassed. The war years at home, said First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, were no ordinary time, and no time for weighing anything except what we can best do for the country. Beyond the sacrifices, large and small, being asked of every American, The social fallout from the war's demand for men and material would change America forever. The American family would be restructured as mothers now left their homes and children to do their part on the nation's assembly lines.
There was this thing called the war effort, and it took on a life of its own. You had to be doing something for the war effort.
Lights out up there!
My father was an air raid warden, and when Patrick Joseph Shine said on Leicester Street in his rich Irish tenor voice, "Lights out," the damn lights went out all over the neighborhood.
Name, please. Bud Abbott. Costello's mine. You don't understand.
Hollywood stars left stateside did their part too, becoming pitchmen for war bonds.
Bond. You're saving your money by lending it to Uncle Sam. See, Uncle Sam needs that money to build ships and planes, tanks. And what? Tanks. You're welcome.
Virtually everyone would do something for the war effort. At the very least, that meant adjusting to the rationing of a slew of items formerly taken for granted.
There was gas rationing, and you had either A stickers or B stickers or C stickers, which you put in the windshield of your car, and it told how much gas you were allowed.
Cut the use of your car. Save its tires by driving slowly and by driving less.
The president appealed to a national sense of collective sacrifice, asking Americans not only to do without, but to actively collect the materials of war.
Turn in all the old rubber anywhere and everywhere.
People sent in their rubber toys from their dogs that had died with a letter saying this was Snuffy's favorite toy and please contribute to the rubber scrap dog. Women cut up their girdles and sent them to Roosevelt personally. Kids would gather up the rubber, gather up the aluminum.
There were kids' memories collecting tinfoil. Everybody felt that what they did mattered. And that just was as I reflect back on it, of just inestimable importance.
And so too were the newsreels and the propaganda films which united the home front in its hatred of the enemy.
I remember going and seeing the newsreels, you know, cock-a-doodle-doo, and there you were in the war.
So any immediate kind of takeaways there when you look at the what went into the home front at home? Anything that kind of like pop out?
Everyone did their part. It seemed like a lot of people either donated stuff or took part in rationing things or even got a job. And it seemed like the home front kind of was united by the war. Like everyone had a common cause to strive for. So that was interesting.
Okay. Yeah. And so that's where we speak to, like, you know, the government being able to, in some ways, how they're using the media and getting us to be on the war or behind it. And I suppose, you know, going up against someone like Japan or Germany, Italy, so much is known out there. Their task might have been a little bit easier to get people rallied around as opposed to in that First World War. The idea of rationing. Now, one thing, you know, it talks about, like, you know, everyone was so excited or they complied with the rationing. But one thing is, we do know that, you know, if you want it, you can find it. So there was a black market trade in the United States, you know, kind of the shady, let's go in the alley and up come the back of a truck and let's talk deal here and stuff like that. But Americans, you know, they did have to deal with ration books as well. You know, and so that's what I was doing over there. I just thought about it. It's like, I have some ration books from World War II, you know, and in there, you know, you got your stamps. And so when you went to the store, they take the stamps out, and everyone in your family got a ration book. All right. So if you're a family of 8, everyone got a ration book. So things were going to be fine. Now, near the end of when you get a new book, you're supposed to, or when a new book is being issued, you're supposed to return your old books. All right. So, but notices and all that stuff came out. So a former student had given me these, and I didn't ask, well, why didn't they ever turn them in and stuff like that? Because on the backside, they always, they give you some important things here, about doing your part. Because if you're not, you're aiding the enemy, all that stuff, trying to do some really good guilt, all that stuff. But hey, good luck trying to find a car. Brand new car was not going to be made during this time period at all. And over the weekend, I had watched that movie Ford versus Ferrari. You ever see that one? All right, that's a good movie there. But I remember the scene. It just popped in my head, like when the Ford is having a conversation with Shelby, and they look out over at the Ford plant, and Ford tells Shelby, it's like that factory was turning out the airplanes to be used in Europe and in the Pacific and stuff like that. And so this isn't the first time Ford's gone to war with Europe, so we're going to war against basically Ferrari here. It's a car movie and all that stuff. But thinking about, he's not making cars, they're making planes and all that stuff. And who is helping the process of making the planes is our secret weapon, which is women. That's going to be used, which prompted me to ask my older sister, because she has more contact with my aunt, asking, did Grandma Hyder ever work in a war industry plant? And no, she didn't. But my aunt had informed us that my grandfather, who would have been 35 at the time in 1945, had just received his draft notice that if the war was going to continue, he would have to go into the induction center and go through the physical and all that stuff. And he was 35, but luckily the war had ended, and so Gramps didn't need to go. I thought it'd be kind of interesting, though, considering my grandfather's name is Adolf Hyder, and I'm sure my mom got picked on during the Second World War in some ways, that your father's name is Adolf, and we're going up against an Adolf Hitler. All right, enough of that, digress. Okay, but anyone have any takeaways here? Other takeaways? Did you pick up on how long it took to make a ship?
Was it 7 days?
17. 7 days would be phenomenal. I'd be like, if you turn the key on it, let's hope it starts in 7 days. 17 days, I mean, it's fully operational, that it can go from point A to point B. Yes. So how did they do that? It was all prefab. It's all about prefab. Building so much of the components outside at different parts in the shipyard, and then it's like putting a snap together model. Just snap it, put it together. That ingenuity that was used to put together the ships in 17 days helped build suburbia after the war. That mentality is going to apply to building homes. And so Cottage Grove Estates, Thompson Estates, all that stuff, they're being built with this idea of how they built weapons in the Second World War. So there we go. I think, Drew, you had talked about how war is innovating and how then it can apply. Here's an example of it, all that stuff. All right, but that's total war. That is total war there. Okay, so last bit here for today is realistically, and I'm going to give you some time to work on it, is this idea of total war. And it's been out there for a little while. So since it's been open since forever, and realistically, in theory, last Thursday, I had talked about it, and Friday is realistically when it was going to be initiated. And so hopefully you've taken a look at it. All right. And so tomorrow it is due. And I guess when some people would say, is that a soft due date or hard due date? It's soft, but knowing that Friday you have an assessment that pops up. All right. So I'll give a little latitude here. But still, again, we're looking at the three elements again here: theaters of war, role of civilians, and the growth of the government power. What complicates this one a little bit is knowing that the different theaters of action are pretty hot and heavy. Where in the First World War, yeah, it seemed to be primarily in Europe. Very little on the what we'll call the high seas. You had the blockade, you had the submarines, and you had that epic Battle of Jutland or Jutland. But here in the Second World War, war at sea is going to be instrumental here, especially in the Pacific theater with the aircraft carriers. And I guess, if you ever saw the remake of Midway, the movie Midway, it really showcased the importance of aircraft and aircraft carriers in that theater. But you also had Europe, you had North Africa, and the Pacific theater. So you got to make some referencing to those areas. The role of civilians, we do have an idea of it, but the acts of genocide and deportations are going to be bigger here. We do have the Holocaust that is occurring, but you also have acts of genocide in some ways can be viewed as use of slave labor too. When we talk about, we go back to that first unit when we looked at genocide and ethnic cleansing and all that going in. That all fits into this kind of definition. The deportations, is the United States, do we come clean in this war? Did we do any shifting and movements?
Yeah.
We may not have, well, we did. We have Japanese Americans, right? And it was in the 1930s, we deported some Mexican Americans because it was the Great Depression, and the theory was deport Mexican Americans and freeze up jobs. That was a little mark on the United States in the 30s. Now in the 1940s, we have Japanese internment. So both sides are going to have some issues when it comes to maybe atrocities towards civilians here. But then also, as we saw in the video clip, the need for workers in the various war industries. In the video clip, it showed war industries, but we also need workers in rural America to work on the farms, and also in other countries as well. And women will be play a role here too. We also have propaganda out there. Propaganda kind of went rogue there, but that should be under growth of government power as well here. But I want you with the government power, just select two nations. Just focus on two. Don't have to cover all of them. Just focus on two: the United States and the Soviet Union, United States and Germany, whatever it is, whatever you feel inclined to do here. In propaganda, and the importance of propaganda here is big one. As we can see here, I got enough propaganda posters hanging up here, coming out of Life magazines during the Second World War here. And every major corporation got in on the game of propaganda. And then, of course, we're looking at how do we make this, showcase this as a total war. That's our big BHQ. All right. And again, you have a variety of ways for this finished product. Okay? A variety of ways. Added a few new things in here just in case you want to draw some political cartoons. You go right ahead. You need to have at least 3 political cartoons, probably because we got 3 big areas that you need to focus on. All right? Storyboard, personal letters, or diaries. This could be a good one here as well. Or just go straight up, go into the B range here with the Google Slides and stuff like that. Now, Google Slides and PowerPoint, you can put some your voice to it, and so then all of a sudden now it's back up to the A range. So it is possible. All right. You can work with up to 2 other individuals, so you can get your historical buddies going here. Can be in this class, or could be someone who's not sitting here.
Wait, is it up to 2 as a group of 3 or
Yeah.
2 people?
Yeah, we can go up to 3. So I think that's the same we had for the First World War. We'll do that for the Second World War as well. All right. Okay, so we have that task at hand. And that will be our emphasis for today, to work on that piece. Tomorrow I will talk a little bit more about that Friday assessment. Okay? At least the assessment that opens up on Friday. All right, so that is what I have for you right now. Let's work on this task. Those at home who have logged in can exit as well. We can exit our Google Meet at this point.